From Mesopotamia to South America, this symbol has made the rounds, not only in distance, but also in time. What does it really mean, and what should you think about it? What cultures, religions, and organizations have used it, and what do they know that we don't? Welcome to the Occult and the Apocalypse with Kristen, aka Fire Tarot Mama, where I tell you about how they took what was once widely known about God, spirituality, and you, and locked it away. Come with me while I show you what I've learned from science, religion, cultural beliefs, and mythology to turn the occult and the apocalypse into just the hidden and the revealed. This week will probably be a shorter episode because the meaning of this symbol has been lost to time. It's usually interpreted as the winged disk of the sun, but it can also be represented by a man within a circle or a beetle. It has been found in many cultures, and it's first attested to in the Old Kingdom in Egypt, somewhere between 2600 and 2100, so about 4,500 years ago. In Egypt, over time, it held many names and it stood for many gods. It began being located within the Levant and in Mesopotamia and Asia around 2000 BC. So 1 to 500 years later. In Zoroastrianism, it was the visual aspect of Ahura Mazda. And when Persia was a Zoroastrian nation, some seals showed the winged disc with the Ankh on either side. Okay, so the Egyptian Ankh. In the 8th century BC, the winged solar disk appeared on the Hebrew seals associated with the royal line of Judah. In Malachi 4:2, there is a reference to a winged son of righteousness, which we will discuss a little bit later. In total, it's been found in ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, Illyria, Iran, Judah, Greece, and even in South America. Groups like the Rosicrucians, the Freemasons, the Lima, the Philosophy, and the Unity Church, alongside others, have used it. It is also used, or has been used, as logos on vehicles such as Chrysler, Mini, Bentley Motors, Lagonda, and Harley Davidson. Since World War II, U.S. military aircraft have had a circle with stripes through it, like the wings on each side. Not only is it representative of likely the sun as a divine being, but also directly related to kings. Syrian kings, Persian kings, Judah's kings, Egyptian kings, and so on. Of course, in the ancient and not so ancient time, kings were seen not as man, but as God, or of a son of God, or at a minimum, divinely appointed by God. What exactly does this winged disc mean? Now, ancient astronaut Darius will say that it points to some sort of vehicle descending from the sky, particularly citing the cultures where it's a man or personified animal nearby it. I'm not sure how I feel about that theory. It's not my favorite, but it's also not my least favorite. Recent disclosures from the government regarding UAPs and biological remains does make one wonder. And of course, the use of it in corporate logos associated with vehicles can kind of feed into that. Cars and flying military, transportation. This winged disc figure is also seen in pre-Columbia America. I was able to find 2 Mayan examples of the winged disc. The first one looks very curiously close to Egyptian winged disc. And the other one is a bit more flourished and personified, like some sort of like little demon or something. One of the interesting things about this is that the winged disc from the Mayan population, the wings are flipped differently from the wings on the Egyptian. So on the Egyptian, it looks like it's coming towards you with the wings outstretched. But in the Mayan, the wings are down, almost like it's heading away from you. Okay? And the reason that this is so interesting is because if there was some sort of cosmic event in the sky, like a distant supernova, it would be reversed in the southern hemisphere from the northern hemisphere. This is exampled by the fact that the constellation Orion is upside down in the southern hemisphere. Could this be representative of some sort of cosmic event that was observed? But it would have had to have persisted for hundreds of years prior to make it to all the places that it did, after being in Egypt for quite some time, then Asia and Mesopotamia. It's also possible that its adoption of Egyptian symbology in the South America portion of it through early trading, okay? The concept kind of seems ridiculous. However, there have been Egyptian mummies that were found with cocaine and tobacco, both in their remains and in their tombs. And these plants are only native to the Americas. Some people are exploring the concept that Egyptian boats may have been able to make it to Americas to do some trade through different techniques. There are many theories on what this winged disc could be, but it's said to have stood for divine protection, sovereignty, and celestial power. It has been associated with Horus, Ra, and other sun deities, as well as Yahweh. In some cultures, it was accompanied with a snake on either side. In others, there were ankhs on either side. There are even some theories that it would be a representation of Saturn, and the wings are actually rings. Saturn worship does show up predominantly throughout history as well, although there's no clear claim that this symbol is in any way associated with Saturn. I've also heard that some people could believe that this is a collective memory, much like that of Atlantis, something ancient people passed down in memory over time that was rooted in a truth. On Pillar 43 at Göbekli Tepe, one of several sites recently found in modern-day Turkey, about 350 miles away from where it said that Noah's Ark had landed, there's an image of a huge vulture with a single outstretched wing. A disc rests on this outstretched wing, not with the wing being entirely symmetrical, to where the disc sits. It almost looks like it's holding the disc in its hand, okay? When you zoom in on this, you just see the disc and the wing underneath, okay? Some people have said that this disc that's being held could be representative of the sun or the pole star, or potentially something that came towards the Earth head on, like a comet, which would look like an enlarging circle if you were looking at it dead on. A pinpoint of light that progressively gets bigger. Göbekli Tepe was built somewhere between 9500 BC, more than 7,000 years before the winged sun appeared in Egypt. It's been postulated that Göbekli Tepe is a monument to memorialize a comet that struck and caused the Younger Dryas event around 10,850 BC. Interestingly enough, just above the head of the vulture are those funny little buckets or baskets or bags that we see on stone monuments built thousands of years later. Even as far back as 9500 BC, these bags or buckets, they call them the handbags. They're in Assyrian art. They're South American art. They're all over the world. They had some sort of distinct meaning even thousands of years earlier. Okay? So it's not a far-fetched concept that since these bags were also present and they go on to be used in other monuments thousands of years later, that potentially the vulture holding the disc later just became the winged disc. I often wonder if those using it around 2500 BC had any knowledge or memory of how those similar symbols were used 7,000 years prior. Okay. And you can't help but imagine how, at the time the Egyptian mummies were imbibing on cocaine and tobacco, the Olmecs in South America were carving handbags, and later the Mayans, the winged sun disk. So is the winged sun disk a collective memory of a cataclysm or cosmic event? Is it cross-cultural contamination referring to an undefinable deity? Is it the sign of a complex cosmic event that lingered in human memory? Was it symbolic representation of God or something of the arrival of a cosmic threat or some type of beings claiming to be God? Several of the biblical kings are associated with the winged sun disk. The one that we'll talk about most is actually the last in the line, okay? And King Hezekiah, who was associated with the prophet Isaiah, we talked about last week, had a lot of references of the winged disc around him. Hezekiah's royal seal featured two downward pointing wings and 6 rays coming from the central sun disk. Some have an Egyptian ankh, the key of life, sometimes known as the breath of life. These were found with the inscription of the Hebrew word meaning belonging to the king. It was also found on the seals of servants close to the kings Ahaz and Uzziah. Now, King Uzziah ruled Judah for about 52 years, from 791 to 750 BC. His name means my strength is Yah. He became king at 16 and was co-regent with his father for 24 years. It's said that Uzziah's pride became his downfall, not the symbol representative of a foreign god being very close to him through a servant, just his pride. According to 2 Chronicles 26:16 through 21, King Uzziah enters the temple himself and went up to the altar of incense to burn incense to the Lord. He was confronted by the priest who said, "It's not right for you, Uzziah, to burn incense to the Lord. That is for priests, the descendants of Aaron, who have been consecrated to burn incense. Leave the sanctuary, for you to have been unfaithful, and you will not be honored by the Lord God." Uzziah became angry, and suddenly a spot of leprosy broke out on his forehead. He was banished from the temple and then from the palace to live somewhere separate until his death, since people with leprosy had to be secluded. It said that his son Jotham had to rule instead. In the interlinear Bible, the first translation of the Lord in this passage is in verse 16. It's Yahweh the Elohim, which we know is the plural version of God. This would have been edited to read Yahweh the God after the Babylonian exile. The second mention is also verse 16, and the temple of the Lord becomes the temple of Yahweh. Verse 18 is the priests confronting him and stating, "You have transpressed, and you shall have no honor from Yahweh Elohim." Again, plural of gods. Archaeological findings from Mesopotamia show a close tie between Assyria and Judah between the reign of Uzziah and Hezekiah. King Uzziah's son Jotham rules for a while, and then his son, King Ahaz, takes the throne. Ahaz was considered a wicked king. The prophet Isaiah told Ahaz to trust in God instead of foreign allies. Isaiah tells Ahaz to ask for a sign to validate the prophecy. Ahaz refuses, saying he will not test God. Isaiah says a sign will come, and this is considered the messianic prophecy of he will be called Emmanuel. Now, Ahaz is listed in Jesus' genealogy. Assyria intervened at the request of Ahaz. It overtook Damascus and Israel, which was later called Samaria. And he's considered to have yielded to the Assyrians in religion and politics. He even paid homage to Assyrian gods. He died young at 36 and was succeeded by his son Hezekiah. Now, Hezekiah is said to have restored the temple from the foreign influence his father allowed. He's considered to have revolted against the Assyrians and made a significant religious reforms. Hezekiah, whose seal as king had the winged sun disk on it, is also said to have made Judah the focus of Yahweh worship, and went out trying to prevent cult worship and the worship of gods and goddesses. He is said to even have destroyed the bronze serpent that Moses made. Hezekiah is also mentioned in the lineage of Jesus. Unlike his father, it said Hezekiah put his faith in God and overcame Assyria. According to 2 Kings 18:5, no king in Judah among either of his predecessors or successors could be compared to him. It seems Hezekiah may have even married one of the prophet Isaiah's daughters. Unlike his two predecessors, who only had references to the winged sun disk amongst their household with their servants, Hezekiah had it as his primary seal. Reminding people that these texts were written during or after Babylonian exile, the people of Judah were doing this from memory. It's actually more likely that they were referring to Hezekiah's great-grandson. They said in an Assyrian conflict, when he was held up in his palace, basically ending this conflict by giving Assyria either 300 or 800 talents, based on which side you ask. He saved the kingdom. He likely stayed on the throne under the close eye of Assyria. Assyria has a record of this, describing Hezekiah as a caged bird, because although they did not take the palace, they did take most of the territory. And basically, he paid them to go away, and they let him rule the area. So basically, Assyria was like the mob. In fact, Hezekiah's son Manasseh actually reinstituted polytheism, or increased polytheistic practices, and his successor Amon, Hezekiah's grandson, was well known for idolatry. But back to the winged sun disk. So the prophet Malachi references a winged sun of righteousness, which may have been a reference to the winged disk. This is found in Malachi 4:2. And interestingly enough, Malachi in the Christian Bible is the last book before the New Testament. And then hundreds of years later, around 500 to 401 BC, Hermes is depicted with a caduceus, which appears to have a winged disc on top. Now, an elaborate branch of Freemasonry called the Rite of Memphis and Mizraim has a label pin connected to the winged disc. It's a winged sun, and above that is a pyramid with the Eye of Horus, or Eye of Providence. Above that is the Latin for order from chaos, and the letters A, G, D, A, D, M, meaning, when translated, the glory of the great architect of the universe. The winged disc has hawk legs with talons holding a sword. The sword has a banner which displays Latin meaning "my God and my right," which is the motto of the Scottish Rite Freemasons, and the French motto for the Royal Arms of England. It has the most degrees, 99 in total, and it was the merger of two older rites, the Rite of Memphis and the Rite of Mizraim. It's considered Egyptian Freemasonry. The fourth degree is the secret master teaching the truth and existence of one God. Ninth degree is the master elect of 9, teaches the proper administration of justice. The 15th degree is the Knight of the East of the Sword, and it teaches hope and faith. The 16th degree is the Prince of Jerusalem, and it teaches Masonic doctrine. The 18th degree is Sublime Prince Rose Croce, and teaches of an intellectual inheritance. 27th degree is the Grand Commander of the Temple and teaches universal peace. The 33rd degree is Sovereign Grand Inspector General, which teaches divine rights. 72nd degree is Sublime Master of Wisdom and studies of mystery traditions. And the 99th is the most supreme Grand Master of the world, Grand Hierophant. The different degrees basically focus on pretty much every religion and spiritual teaching known to man. Kind of like what we've been doing, but I'm not a Freemason. And of course, many hear Freemason and instantly think evil, powerful men carrying out evil backdoor agendas, manipulating the powers around, moving men like chess pieces. Is that really true? I think I'll let you think about that, but I will say this. They hold sacred the same secret symbols that the ancient ancestors of many of us revered. And like many of the mystery schools and secret societies, they probably have a lot more insight into these symbols in their original meanings that, more than the average person does. That's sort of why I do this podcast. There's a time coming, or potentially has already kind of come, that knowledge is supposed to be unlocked and returned to us. And the wicked will prosper no more. No more will the few only have access. Do I think that they're evil? No, not all of them. Only the ones that keep the information hidden to use for their own personal gain. Now, Aleister Crowley had a book called The Winged Beetle. And we find that Freemason or Freemason ideology starts being put into religion and religious ideologies that start particularly in the United States, okay? So then Aleister Crowley writes this book about the winged beetle, which was the other form of the Egyptian. The Egyptians believed that, like the dung beetle, the sky was rolled across the sky, and the sun was rolled across the sky by like a giant beetle, with the wings. So Aleister Crowley is believed to be evil. And I think that the truth kind of lives somewhere in the middle, but he had a lot of ancient Egyptian symbology in his teachings. And did he have evil teachings at some point? I'm only familiar with the teachings that make sense in my brain. But that being said, there's a little nugget of truth in everything. I would say that, like Freemasons, Crowley took the gained knowledge of God, spirit, and the universe and perverted it in order to gain wealth and power. That is something that was passed around a lot, especially amongst the upper echelons within the U.S. Now, another religion that addresses the winged sun is the Jehovah's Witness organization. On their website, they define the word assure as such: the foremost deity of the Assyrians, represented by the winged sun disk. They also note that this is the name of a son of Shem, Noah's son, who is their forefather and therefore could have been originally ancestor worship. They also state that the Assyrian king often declares victory to be to the help of Ashur. But we already talked about this, so why is this interesting? because the founder of what would later be rebranded as the Jehovah's Witness organization was Charles Taze Russell. And he wrote a book called The Divine Plan of the Ages, a helping hand for Bible students. This is his studies of the scriptures series. And on some of the covers of this book is the prominent display of a winged sun disk. Another interesting fact about him is he was buried underneath a tombstone shaped like a large pyramid with many mystical symbols on it. After he died, another leader within the organization tightened the reins, and a lot of the original teachings were declared false light. There's an excellent webpage called JW Facts that draws a lot of conclusions about specifically Jehovah's Witness organization, and their relation to they talk about Adventists, they talk about several different connections that they draw. Now, if you're somebody who is involved in that religion, they typically would not read that type of information. So, but there's a lot to do with this use of the winged sun. In their current theology, it is a representative of a false god. And yet, it was part of their original doctrine. I personally believe all organized religions are a snare and a racket in general, but particularly ones that discourage you from thinking, exploring, or asking questions, and threatening different forms of damnation in the process. Whether that be Crowley's or Russell's or Hubbard's or St. Peter's, most of the time a religion becomes corrupted. They don't teach discernment. They teach total and complete obedience and compliance. But that's why you're here with me instead, to learn it, to draw the conclusions and understandings on your own, to test the spirit, and to pick your own definitions from the divine. And perhaps spread the good news, which is the literal translation of the word gospel. Well, that and to help me turn the occult and the apocalypse into just the hidden and the revealed. Next week, I want to talk about the many encounters in antiquity with godlike beings, or angels. Were they divine interactions, interdimensional beings, maybe mass hallucinations? I don't know. We'll see. But I'll see you then. Good night.